Do you ever wonder how a railroad gets itself business? Sometimes opportunities come to the railroad, and sometimes the railroad facilitates the opportunities. We are going to find out how the Escanaba and Lake Superior Railroad gained some of their business. Tom Klimek handled their sales and marketing for a number of years and is going to fill us in. Some of what they developed may surprise you. They were quite the innovators. Quick history. The original E&LS ran from Escanaba, Michigan to Channing, where it connected with the Milwaukee Road. The Milwaukee Road went into bankruptcy in 1977, and in the 1980s and 1990s, the E&LS took over the operation of the Milwaukee Road trackage north of Green Bay, along with a little former CNNW and Sioux line. Okay, let's get to the good part. Hello friends, KillerBee here. Today is going to be a great interview. I've got Tom Klimek with me. Tom was the main sales and marketing guy at the Escanaba and Lake Superior for, how long were you there?
34 and a half years.
Wow, and I'm sorry, you retired in?
2018. September of 2018.
Okay, but prior to then, you were with the Bay Lakes Regional Planning Commission that actually helped create the E&LS as we know it today.
Yeah,
right?
well, it was all in the time frame of, Milwaukee Road going bankrupt again.
Yeah.
And, in addition to that, it was, the Northwestern was abandoning a lot of lines, branch lines, obviously. So I was kind of thrown into that position of, assessing the impacts on customers, agriculture, the list goes on.
Yeah.
The E&LS was already operating.
Right.
And their business changed radically when the Groveland line shut down. So, but they were tied into that Milwaukee Road main line. And a counterpart of mine in Michigan, a guy by the name of Bob Tuttle, great guy, still keep in touch with him. So he was working at MDOT, and he and I were the Wisconsin-Michigan teammates working on, we need to save this line because the paper mill was up in Ontonagon. So Michigan, not so much in Wisconsin, but Michigan had some real key stakeholders that would have been impacted by losing that line. We did a feasibility study, and we determined that, let's put this 208 miles up for bid. John was operating in his little niche.
John Larkin.
John Larkin.
Right.
Off the Wells line, which was a core line of the E&LS coming out of Escanaba going to Channing. I think he had, or was on the verge of doing a deal to buy Ontonagon to Iron Mountain, just the Michigan portion of it. And he pulled that off. So the kind of last phase of our work, our meeting Bob and myself, was to preserve everything to Green Bay. And believe it or not, there were other parties very interested, including the Green Bay and Western.
Oh, really?
Which will, I think, surprise people. But they looked at it very closely. I think in the end, they never put in a bid, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But they were a player, and there was one other player. So John said, no, we're here. We've already taken the step in Michigan. We'll take the step in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So that's how E&LS wound up in Green Bay.
I'm just dying to ask about the Piggyback. Move from Ontonagon down to Green Bay from 2008. Whatever you can remember about it, like how did you secure it? Did you guys think of it, or did they come to you?
No, that was John Larkin's idea.
Really?
Yeah. But that was sort of phase two. So phase one, we were, I set up a transload in the Nicolay Industrial Park, just off Military Avenue on the west side of Green Bay. The Morley Murphy Company owned the building at the time, and I knew the owner very well, so he leased. They've got a 2-car spot inside, so we leased that. We rebuilt part of that track coming into their facility, and we shuttled cars in and out of there. And the cars were medium corrugated from the stone container mill in Ontonagon. So we brought that down, unloaded that, and then took those same empties, and we had a truck connection with scrap paper. We had our own man on site with his forklift and any equipment. He handled that every couple of days when we came in. And then the scrap paper obviously would go back in the boxcar up to Ontonagon. Cool. So it was a nice little project.
Yeah.
And then John got the idea. Intermodal was it was sort of catching fire. And so he went out and purchased 7 intermodal cars, as I remember it. I was thinking 8, but I think it's 7. And using equipment from some Navy surplus property, tugs and barges that we bought, and he basically cannibalized some of the barge equipment to retrofit onto these cars to secure the semi-trailers. So that kind of eliminated the Morley Murphy site. So what we wound up doing is we leased some property in the Howard Industrial Park, just off Lineville Road, and there's a private spur in back of I think they manufactured parts for maybe the paper industry, but they never used that rail line, so I negotiated a deal with them to lease that. We were rolling through there right by this place all the time. So we set it up. We brought in a ramp to add to the spur track. It was a constant turn of loads of corrugated coming down. We reloaded the intermodal cars and with scrap and went back.
And it was overnight service basically from Ontonagon to Green Bay,
right?
Pretty much.
Yes.
When the trailers got down to Green Bay, was it pretty much local delivery like in the valley here, or did they go beyond down to Chicago? And
no, the target customer group was definitely in the Fox Valley. Smurfit, I think it was Smurfit at that point, because there were a number of ownership changes, but I think they handled the drayage aspect of it. So they used their subcontractors. Worked out really well.
Yeah, and then, so what ended it? With the mill shutting down?
The mill shutting down.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Okay.
Brian. Yeah, so that was in 2000, late 2008, maybe early 2009 that we got notice that was going to happen.
So intermodal was something totally new to you. How do you go about pricing it? How did you kind of determine what what your costs are going to be, and how did you?
Well, John determined that it was going to be bargain basement, and to get the concept in place and attract them to this service. And in hindsight, I think he did the right thing, albeit, little did we know that within a year or maybe less, we'd be facing the prospect of losing our largest customers. So they were all for it. If I remember correctly, it was something like $200 a trailer. I mean, it was a bargain for them.
Interestingly, both ramps still exist. The one from Ontonagon is sitting on a flat car at Pori, Michigan, And the Green Bay one is still in its original location in Howard. I've seen some way bills and bills of lading from 1995 for the business out of Stone at Ontonagon. And I was really surprised because a lot of the cars were routed E&LS, Green Bay, FRVR, Milwaukee to the Sioux line, and not to the CNW, which I always just assumed that CNW and Fever were kind of tied at the hip, you know, as far as their routings. I was just curious, do you have any recollection how Sioux Line was able to beat out the Northwestern from what should have been their preferred partner?
I think part of that was just with the personalities. And it sounds like a bit of a strange answer, but we had plenty of ups and downs with the CNW, to the point where, you know, if there was any potential for moving traffic via someone else, John would be happy to try to do that. When it came to something like that, John always jumped in. So that would have been his call. Okay. So let's go into the wood chip move to James River. And am I correct then it came out of just north of Amasa? Just north of Amasa. So I guess again, did the railroad generate that move, or did somebody come to you and say, hey, we've got this opportunity? Or when we came onto the scene in the early 80s, I mean, our presence in Green Bay grew. At the time, or just prior to E&LS starting to move wood chips, that chip mill was actually open. And I think everything was being trucked. They also had another site in central Wisconsin. So it was truck from both. When we came on the scene and knowing how they unloaded at the mill here in Green Bay, we came up with a plan to move wood chips in boxcars. And we went out to, I think they were headquartered at the time in Roanoke, Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, but we went out there, met with them, talked about conceptually how we could do this together. And they were excited about it because trucking from north of Amasa, Michigan into Green Bay, especially 6 months out of the year, can be a little challenging. So, or at least at that time was a little challenging. So our next step then was we met with the local plant guys here in Green Bay, and a really excellent traffic manager by the name of Don Vandermus was in charge at that point. And after he looked at the pricing and realized that they could be saving a lot of money going rail. And again, it was pricing to make it work right out of the box and make sure that one of those offers that couldn't be refused. But you had a switch charge too, didn't you? Oh yeah, there was a switch charge, right. So we put that package together and it worked. I couldn't believe it worked as well as it did. I mean, one of the little glitches we had, which we corrected, when the wood chips were blown into the boxcars up in Amasa, there was no vent or ventilation in that boxcar. So after a period of time, the wood chips will dry out. And we had an issue with, I think, we only had one car, but it kind of caught on fire from the combustion inside the car. Yeah. And so we took that entire fleet of boxcars that we dedicated to the move, and we had about 280 under lease at that point, and leased and or owned. Wow. So we cut vents on either end so that there'd be some, there'd be a release of that air, and it took care of the problem. We did 8 cars a day, 5 days a week.
Okay.
And 50 weeks out of the year, only during shutdown in Green Bay and/or maintenance work at Amasa, we had just a really consistent, good flow of wood chips into Green Bay. It worked so well that ultimately they did $1 million upgrade to that chip plant.
Wow.
In, I believe, around 1988, 87, somewhere in there.
So what caused the move to end?
The Metropolitan Sewerage District was going to impose kind of like a surcharge on what they were doing with their pulp mill, and it would have caused big time problems for them financially. So as we, in another step in this process, is we were looking at equipment to unload boxcars on a lift. We would have a door that would come off from gravity, and the chips would come down into a surge bin and then go up on the main feed into the pulp mill. And we did an engineering study. We had everything in place, and then this other issue through the city came into play, and they just decided we can't have this pulp mill open anymore.
Oh, so they shut down making their own pulp.
Yep.
Okay. So how did the chips move in the boxcars? Did you have like grain doors?
Yes.
Cooper. Okay.
Yes.
So when they unloaded the car, they just basically ripped the grain door and it just flowed out of the car?
Actually, no, it came to a platform. They took out the cardboard, and then there was an operator on this like portable vacuum that they went in, and it had forks on the front end where they actually plowed into it, like kind of like a snowblower, actually.
Okay.
Where they loosened all the chips, and then at the back end of this piece of equipment, it sucked it out like a vacuum. And it was tedious, I think, but it worked for them.
Sure.
They got it down to about 45 minutes to unload one car. Now that sounds like it's still a lot.
Were these 50 footers?
50 footers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it was a great movement for the time it lasted. And there again, just jumping to P&G, huge business development for us as a railroad. I mean, they had been basically trucking in all their pulpwood, as I remember it. And we started thinking, what can we do, to capture this business, since we were coming into Green Bay anyway. Again, there's a switch involved at the mill, but so be it.
Yeah.
And about, I don't know, a month or two into trying to figure out, the steps to get this thing going, our car shop manager was on vacation in Louisiana. Just by chance, he had been looking at some cars, and he stumbled across 73-foot not center beams, but bulkhead flats.
Yeah.
Sitting on a storage track in a swamp. And he liked to embellish a little bit once in a while, so he claimed there were snakes and crocodiles and whatever. Okay, sure. So he told John about it, and John said, "What are they asking?" And he said, "Well, I think," he mentioned, somewhere around $20,000 a copy. And these cars had plenty of life left on them. They just didn't have a purpose.
Yeah.
So John bought them immediately, and we got them up to our shop in Wells, which at the time was right outside the main office windows. I mean, a lot of this work was done during the winter. But we took these 40 bulkhead 73 footers and we stripped them down to the center I-beam, and then John and his father Wade had a plan to attach side stakes to that I-beam, and in other words, have pulpwood loaded onto these new cars, quote unquote, parallel to the rail rather than parallel to the ties. And that was unheard of at that time, at least I think up in this region.
Yes.
And that was, we unveiled that, and we, you and I have talked off and on over the years about how you do things in a short line sort of bubble. We didn't have to do anything. When paper mills saw this, they were all over it. Procter Gamble jumped all over it. And we sort of incentivized them to do business with us because we also helped them manage their wood yards. Many of them knew on the E&LS. And that was a little tedious, but the person handling it did a pretty good job, and we were doing unit trains of wood coming into Green Bay, combination of the wood chips for James River and the pulpwood for P&G, but almost every other week.
So it was the same scenario. Eventually P&G shut down their wood pulp operation.
Yeah, same thing with their pulp mill. Part of that, I think with P&G, it was more so just the fact that they could get Brazilian wood pulp. They even took it, actually, and I don't know how it transferred that way, but they'd get a barge or two into the mill right on the Fox, right on the Fox River. Not often, but once in a while.
So as long as we're talking pulpwood, the logs that go up to Sagola now, I mean, that's a really short move. How in the world did you capture a move that short?
One of the things that always drove my decision making on rates was multiple car movements. In other words, I would offer incentives for as few as 3 up to 25 in a block. And with the way we were moving trains at the time, it was not a challenge operationally for us. So I always priced in multiples. And part of that came from a mentor of mine, and you'll remember this name, Lee Davis. Lee was AVP, I think, at the GB&W at the time, and I spent a lot of time with him on various projects. And he always told me, I don't think we ever had a meeting where he didn't bring up the fact that just remember, the goal is, you're not here for one car. You want to be here for 10. And that kind of always stuck in the back of my mind, good, bad, or indifferent. But for forest product, I mean, let's face it, we're not moving, a hugely valuable commodity with wood chips or round logs, unless they're hardwood lumber logs of some sort that have some value. But for pulpwood, worked pretty well based on the volume growth that we had.
Yeah. So how would you go about, again, pricing? I mean, would you just, whatever it took to get the business was your rate, or what would...
Yeah, that was partially it. I I think the prospect for how much I could grow that business always, well, that's for any business. That always comes into play. Sounds very elementary, but for pulpwood, you don't have to go through a very complex formula to come up with numbers. And I think, again, I don't know of many customers that we had in forest products that shipped the onesie, twosie kind of movements. They were all multiple car movement. And that's driven by the fact that we had the equipment. We had over 90 cars, not obviously 40 of them being what we call the superflats that we found in Louisiana that we converted. But we had other cars as well. So you could kind of, figure out who, obviously P&G with taking 25 at a time or whatever the number was, or all 40. We wanted to make sure they were happy. And, but we had plenty of other cars to go around as well. You look at 280, basically 50 footers, 52 foot cars, and then you add on another 90 plus pulpwood cars, and you're sitting in pretty good position, especially in the territory that we've got. You had to rely on what the territory offered as far as resources, and wood was pretty much it.
You didn't have the ability to do any costing or cost study.
Right.
So you really didn't know what your cost to move a car from A to B was. You would basically price what it took to get the business.
Right. One of the toughest, not toughest projects, but toughest analysis came in the world's shortest 3-line haul on pulpwood from the Nicolay Badger Northern Railroad to or over, was it the Sioux line or was WC in place by that point?
Probably WC.
E&LS to Sagola, Michigan.
Really?
3 lines, less than 50 miles, and yet it worked. And I can tell you right now, I think our share may have been somewhere in the range of $150. But it worked. And I don't know what the other divisions were, but I often smile thinking about it because less than 50 miles and you get 3 railroads.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Fast forward to 2025, no, wouldn't have worked. Will never work these days. But we had some spot moves of ore. They call it paint ore.
Right.
That was loaded at Sidnaw and went to Quincy, Illinois. And it was a colored ore. And believe it or not, was used in the making of toothpaste. When you get the colored toothpaste.
Are there any moves you want to talk about?
One, when I started very early in the process, and this just kind of fell into my lap, there's a new pipeline that was constructed across the UP, but it was 500 cars that just sort of fell into our lap, and we brought them up to, of all places, Floodwood, Michigan, offloaded there, but it was a high revenue mark for us. Nothing that I could have ever dreamt of at the time, because that was in probably 86, I'm thinking. The other one is kind of moving back to the Ontonagon story, is in 2010 when that mill closed, obviously we were challenged in a lot of different ways, the main one being financially. And I struck a deal with a name that's very familiar to you, Denny Hebel.
Yes.
And Bill Rice and Mark Cummings from Sea Rice Coal, back then here in Green Bay. And we moved 55,000 tons of the Smurfit coal that was left at the plant, or left really on the dock, and made that move and actually bridged the gap for us financially until we were able to abandon from Ontonagon to Rockland. That was huge. Without that movement, the abandonment would have been far larger. I know that. I think we would have been talking probably all the way to Sidnaw.
The E&LS purchased from Sidnaw to Nestoria. In your mind, what was the intent? Just more track to store cars, or was there business that he was hoping to get to by doing that?
Yes. I think John's thinking was eventually Nestoria up towards Houghton would wind up not being operated. And there's rumors, I think even today about lots. Yeah, what lots, is lots going to have service, not have service, that kind of thing. So, but John also saw an opportunity, I think, to develop maybe a rail to water project up in Houghton. I know the state of Michigan owned some right-of-way. I don't know as if the track was still in place, but they owned some right-of-way going all the way up into Houghton, and he thought that might be an opportunity to look at. So, but that was John.
Okay.
Always thinking in strategic, yeah. But he also very creatively. I mean, I would maybe put it that way too, because what he and his father came up with for those superflats, to me, is still one of the most remarkable achievements I've seen in short line railroading, period. We looked at establishing a water route from Thunder Bay to Ontonagon using a ship that was designed to move logs on Lake Superior. And we spent quite a few days up in Thunder Bay meeting with the paper mill up there and others. And we had found a site right on the paper mill property where we could actually move the logs down, load up the ship, and then take the ship directly to Ontonagon. Now, that was Canadian pulpwood, not the fine pulpwood that's grown in the UP or northern Wisconsin. But we thought, this could be another opportunity, because it's 66 miles from Thunder Bay to Ontonagon, Michigan.
Oh,
compared to, I wouldn't have a clue what Thunder Bay to Duluth, around Ashland or wherever you wind up. I mean, hundreds of miles. So that was another project we worked on for a while. The part of it was I think there was one guy that owned that ship. It only had, I shouldn't say only, it was pretty good capacity. I think it was 18,000 cords on a boat. But the concern, he wasn't anxious to sell. So then we tried to figure out if this guy could be a partner. It was, again, an interesting exercise, I'll put it that way, in looking at, developing additional business.
Did you have any involvement in 1995? The line to Oconto Falls from South Junction was purchased. Did you have any involvement in the rationale for buying that, or what was that Oconto Falls at the time? Or
well, it was Bay Lakes Co-op essentially, and we also we thought we'd have an opportunity with the paper mill there, which is still there. It used to be ST paper. I'm not sure what it's called now. It's been so long. So we thought there'd be an opportunity with the paper company, with Bay Lakes, and McDermott's was just beginning, I think, to expand into warehousing to go along with their trucking operation. They had a nice industrial park. Again, just another opportunity that we might, and we came close on a number of occasions to landing an industry or a potential customer into that industrial park, but everything didn't quite work out that way. We, the deal itself was extremely good. We got some help from Bay Lakes, and some help from the county, some help from WSDOT to pull off the deal. So we managed to, save the 6.5, 7 miles.
And then how does car storage work? That's a revenue move in, it's a revenue move out, and separate from that, you've got a daily storage
rental
amount.
Yeah.
And then is there a switch?
Oh yeah,
time?
Yeah, and there's a switch rate applied when they're called out.
And normally you specify no cherry picking. I assume it's just a car is a car, and
we didn't used to have cherry picking, and then found out the hard way. We needed to do something with cherry picking because you can't move 400 cars to get out 20.
Yeah.
And not get something for that effort. So we put in a cherry picking policy, and that was attached to any contract we had on car storage. And I don't think, I'm gonna say it wasn't until the late 90s, and we were already storing cars, plenty of them by that time. So yeah, we learned the hard way on that, but it still was, a huge chunk of revenue for us.
As you can see, John Larkin and the E&LS were quite the innovators. We will close out with the E&LS's attempt to recapture sanitary paper business on rail out of Kimberly-Clark at Marinette, Wisconsin. The Wells Car Shop modified a 101 series boxcar with a high roof. But it was too late in the game, as Tom will explain.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to capture any of that business because the customer base for KC, either had gotten rid of direct rail or didn't have the logistics to handle a boxcar. I think we wound up using it or tried it in canned goods services out of Oconto Falls through McDermott's warehouse. But even then, it was actually too big a car for that.
So with that, we will bring our conversation with Tom to a close. I hope you have enjoyed hearing about some of the innovative ideas that E&LS tried over the years. You can subscribe here as more videos are coming, and also here's a link to past ones. Thank you. Bye for now.